All right, folks, what if I could give you a document that could 2x, 3x the value of your business and increase cash flow in the next 3 months? It sounds like a miracle, but it's true. It's your sales system. And we're going to talk about that with the expert in it, Nick Loise. Nick, say hi.
Hello.
And he's the former VP of Sales and President of GKIC, one of the largest direct response organizations there is. And he's has a great history of sales. We're going to talk about how that sales system can 2x the value of your company, even 3x it. When to start building your sales process, the myth of not liking sales and how to transform it. Who's breaking it? Is it marketing or sales? What type of salesperson you should hire, and when. The unusual places that Nick finds awesome salesperson, and the question, should the owner become the sales manager? All this on the Garlic Marketing Show. But if you'd like to get a hold of our sales system and become one of our video case story strategists, go to videocasestory.com/strat app. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, where you can apply to become a video case story strategist and use our sales system. All right, let's get started.
My name is Gino Wickman. I was introduced to Ian, and that's what brought me into this video world and got me embracing this video world. And Ian did exactly what I hoped. He got me really comfortable with putting videos out to the world and having a great strategy around putting videos out to the world, because there's so much more than just shooting a video. And so the way that he positions those videos, optimizes those videos, he's done a great job.
All right. We were just talking about it. It's crazy that business owners think they don't have to worry about sales. It's just weird, like, to even say that, right?
I don't know how any business, we were just talking about it in the pregame, right? And I don't know how that happens and how they think you could get into business and not get into sales and not having to do it, or at the very least build up systems and processes. So when you hire salespeople, you set them up for success. It just does not. It befuddles me when sales owners don't want to do anything in the sales arena.
Well, and you said something there too, because I want to talk about marketing and sales, which one's breaking, but it's almost impossible to tell what's breaking your sales if you don't have a system that you can monitor, right?
100%, right? So you don't know, right? So data will lead us to where we need to go. And this is one thing too. We don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but where you could use ChatGPT to analyze your data. And so if you do it like we say, and you and I are both acolytes of this, is really creating a sales system, creating a process and a system that is proven and repeatable, but you have to test it along the way. And so therefore you need data, right? And the data will show you what is working, what's not working. Because here's the one thing I know, if you look at the front end, right, leads coming in, right, not all leads should go to sales, right? And so I was just reading something this week, 20% of leads that are created by marketing should go to the salespeople. Well, that's a small number, right?
Wow.
And a lot, and we have to test that, right? So that's just one data point that I read somewhere. But I believe it, right? If you think about, especially a larger corporation, which is where a lot of this data comes out of, right? You get, the Coca-Colas of the world, the Salesforces of the world, those, they're going to get a lot of wasted people downloading free reports, a lot of students, a lot of international people that are looking for things. But the average small business person, especially somebody that's paying hard-earned for that marketing, one is you got to turn every lead that is sellable into a sale, just so you get a return on the advertising expense. But really, and I think, I'm going to speak your language, how much video have they consumed, right? How many case studies have they reviewed? So what is the action and activity that they've done prior to or while they're in our funnel? And at a certain point, when do you flip them over to a salesperson? So that salesperson could do what they do best, which is build a relationship, get to the pain, and move them to close, right? Or enroll them, or engage them, or retain them, or whatever it is that your next step or your final step is in your sales process. But you got to do it, right? You need both marketing and sales, especially in this day and age. Not only do you need the marketing on the front end, but you need the marketing on the middle and end of the funnel. Two, because where most people flail, and you and I, and you're an acolyte of this, we spoke about this, is they stop marketing, and you can never turn off your marketing.
No. I want to talk about that in a second, but I jumped right into this. Nick is an exceptional, Nick Loise is not only an exceptional salesman, exceptional sales trainer, and he's been involved in many, many marketing companies, marketing agencies, large organizations. And I've known about Nick for years, and I got to finally meet him at our event with Dan Cashel, and he got up and spoke in 10 minutes. I'm like, dude, you gave me better information in 10 minutes than I think like probably 200 hours of sales education that I had to slog through. That was just like, oh my God, this is the dumbest stuff ever. And then I'm like, oh my God, like, why couldn't I have seen this stuff, years ago? But before we get into the question, tell us a little bit about your company and what you do.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for that. And I think you're diminishing your knowledge and your ability. So you were so far along when I got to you that maybe I just was the sprinkles on top of the sundae. But so sales performance team really came out of a lot of the work I did in my agency when I owned a direct response agency from 2006 to 2012. 2012, we sold it. I had some investors and I had some partners, and people were just ready to kind of churn their money out. I then was recruited by a private equity owned company that some of your listeners may know, which was GKIC, Dan Kennedy's company, now called Magnetic Marketing. And I was their VP of sales. And then later along the way, got promoted up to president, but always was on the sales side of the business. And the work that is in Sales Performance Team, which is my company now, which I created at 2020, wrote their business plan in 2018, 2019. And then some things were going on in the company. Dan had gotten very sick, and I was very visible in the company. So I didn't want to just parachute out because I didn't want people to think that, oh my gosh, what's going on in this? He's fine. He's doing great. He's greater than ever, which is phenomenal, carrying the flag for entrepreneurship and direct response marketing. But what we could find and it's kind of what the topic of this conversation is, business owners get marketing, right? They enjoy marketing. It's a mental stimulation for them. They like testing different things. There's technology, right? So marketing is sexy and fun for many business owners. But what they all struggled with, and they all would come up to me and say, is I can't hire salespeople. Or I hire salespeople and they don't sell anything. Or I hire salespeople and I put them in a system and I don't set them up for success. So I'm really not doing a good job. So those that were self-effacing realized that maybe they were part of the problem and it wasn't the salesperson. So in it, we created a product that was the no BS approach to managing your sales team, right? So that was our moniker. Then we created a workshop, and I did a lot of work with a partner of ours in the workshop, which was bringing bringing business owners in, and we recreated their sales process, recreated their hiring process for their salespeople, and also, they walked out with their playbook, or let's call it the skeleton of their sales process and their playbook, and then they needed to go test it and implement it. Well, they paid us a lot of money for these workshops, and so I said, "There's a business here." But, it's not scalable within the four walls of GKIC. I couldn't spend a lot of my time and effort on it, but it was a great boutique business. And so that's where I launched the business, and it's been going phenomenal ever since then. So that's a long answer to a short question, a typical salesperson. But that's kind of how we got to this point.
And if someone is like, you know what, this sounds great, I'm just not going to listen to the rest of this episode. I'm just going to call Nick up and work with him. Where should they go?
Yeah, so sales pack at salesperformanceteam.com. So salespack.salesperformanceteam.com. Get you all of our stuff. Go hit me up on my website. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Nicholas Loise, Nick Loise, salesperformanceteam.com, or just email me, nick@salesperformanceteam.com. You could text me off our website. So you get a hold of me.
All right, great. So we'll put a link to all that in the show notes. We're going to keep going.
Yeah.
People hate sales. They hate managing sales teams. when you go in there and you help them develop a sales system, that's interesting to me because I've been doing this. We were talking about, I've been doing it for a long time. I've been working on our sales system for a long time. And then I talk to companies that are $4, $5, $6 million in. A, they still don't have a salesperson. But B, they don't have a sales system, which I feel like even if you're the owner, you should be creating a sales system, even if you're running yourself, shouldn't you?
100%. So first thing you do is you start systematizing everything, because so if you want to exit your business as a business owner, you're creating this wealth, right? So, and the wealth is either going to stay in the business and you're going to pass the business on to the children, or you're going to exit it, right? And so usually that's why you build up a business, to have some type of liquidity event, whatever that looks like. And historically, most businesses, the wealth of the business owner is sitting in the business. And so why you want to have a sales process, and really why you want to have everything as processized with standard operating procedures and processes and systems, is it's going to increase the valuation of your business. I don't want to say tenfold, but at least 1 to 2 more turns on the dollar, right? So if you're going to get a 3 times EBITDA, right, earnings before incomes and taxes, or 1 times revenue, by having processes, and especially on the sales side and the marketing side, where you are documented and you have a sales team, you're going to see maybe 2 times or 3 times more on your exit. And so it's a long play and it's a short play. Second thing is that as a business owner, you want to, I think, remove yourself from the sales process. And you and I probably have a debate on when that process and time should be. But I think you should be constantly hiring salespeople and training them up. And that will increase your revenue, but increase a lot of other things, and also free your time so you could focus on new product development, evaluations, and improving the leadership of your organization and the team, building relationships with your key lenders, as well as with your key customers, right? So all the strategic things that the CEO of the business should be doing, you need to do that, but you got to free yourself up from the sales process or managing the sales team. And your point is really, really, really important, because as the business owner on day one, you need to be documenting your sales process, because as time goes on, you're going to just intuitively do things in the sales process and not think to systematize it, not think to write it down. And I use this statement all the time whenever I'm talking to business owners, that I say, you've been selling your business for so long that you intuitively do things and you just don't know it. I could wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning in the dead of sleep and you could close me most likely, right? Or I know that in the sales process, if Nick asks you a question 3 minutes in, you've got to make a statement at 17 minutes in to take care of that question so you don't get an objection at 27 minutes in. But you intuitively know that it's muscle memory, because you've been taking so many reps over the course of time, that if you don't have that as a process, and if you don't have that diagrammed or flow diagram, you and I are big fans of Gantt charting or flow charting and using lucid charts to really flow out a sales process. You really don't have that ability because it's now innate, right? And so you're not going to be able to get microscopic on the sales process and the intent of all the different questions that are asked and answered in the sales process, and all the different intent of why you do things at certain times, right? And listen, I had to get good at this myself. When I owned my agency, we hired a lot of young talent out of school. They interned for us, and then they became sales teams for us, and then they went into maybe creative side of the business and that. But when I was first starting, they're like, well, how do you do that? Or why do you do that? I'm like, well, you just do it, right? That wasn't fair to them. And so I said, if I'm going to grow this business, so we grew it to about 3.2 million. If I'm going to grow this business, I got to systematize everything, right? I got to collect data. I got to systematize everything. In some businesses, it's the EOS system, and there's a lot of different phraseology for things, but you really have to think about that. And you're spot on that you got to do it on day one, right? Day one, you've got to just start creating this stuff. Whether you're dictating it, whether you're putting lucid charts, whether you're just doing data dumps at the end of the day, because you got to do a little bit of extra work now for a lot more money when you exit, 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now.
And it's the exit part is amazing. But even early on, what I find is I can now, because I have sales systems, when a sale doesn't work and they're qualified and they're like, I'm like, oh, this is the right person. 9 times out of 10, I can spot where in the system I jumped part of the system. And like, it's because you're like, oh, this person's perfect. Let me just skip to step 3. And you skip to step 3 and then like, boom, they ghost you. And I like, it happens to me all the time because I'm like, oh, I'm better than this system. And I believe in the system. And then I can go, oh yeah, that's where I screwed up, is I didn't present the numbers properly. And to your point though, if you have the system, it becomes not like, I think that's where it becomes second nature for a lot of people. They don't feel like they're selling at that point because they're just running a system, and it doesn't. And I think that's maybe where people don't like sales. I mean, where do you think like these types of owners don't like sales?
I think everybody likes sales. I think what they don't like is prospecting.
Mm.
I think they like having relationships with clients that are ready to buy, right? And I think they like making the sale and getting the money, right? So I think what they don't like is the prospecting side of the business. I don't think they like their early qualification or disqualifying of clients, right? So let's say the initial discovery process, I don't think they like that. And I think that they don't like the, let's say, negotiation and haggling for money, right? Or dealing with objections. But I think everybody likes asking really good questions and listening to answers from really sharp prospects, right? I think it
Yep.
makes you better as a salesperson. And that engagement, that exchange that they have is enjoyable, right? That's how they built their business. What they don't want to do is grind out the phone every day. What they don't want to do is talk to a lot of tire kickers, if you will, for lack of a better phraseology, right? Or people that aren't qualified. Especially, I know you do a lot of work, in the law, right? They don't want to
Yeah.
just, there's a lot of people that pick up the phone and, they don't even know what questions to ask or who to call. They just went to Google, right? Took the first 3 people and they start calling and telling their problems. They'll start telling their problems to the person on the phone that answers the phone, right? You got to slow them down. Say, hold on, I'm just a receptionist. Let me get you to somebody, right? And so there's ways to set up systems, and we could go deep on that, especially on the financial, on the law side, where you have somebody that is a little bit more than an intake person, but they're asking really good discovery questions that you've mapped out for them. And so then the attorney just comes in and does the close, if you will, does the enrollment, engages the person, answers their high level question that the initial stage can't, and then asks them to be a client, right? And so, I learned long ago, it's the prospecting that burns people out, right? It's the talking to people that aren't qualified, don't have the money. You spend all that emotional engagement in that, and then they're like, well, this is great, but I just can't afford your fees and services, so I'm going to go down the street, and it's dejecting, right? And that's what people
Yeah.
don't like.
No, I agree. And it's tough, but it's interesting. A completely side note, reading Noah Kagan's new book, like $1 Million Weekend or something like that. Noah Kagan from AppSumo and Facebook, he talks about building that rejection muscle.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important, especially for owners. I mean,
I think you're spot on with that. And every time I talk to you, you reference a book. At least this book I read, right? At least I read the first, but I'm like, I got like 5 books last time we were together. I'm like, oh, these are all great. So my Amazon, boxes just start showing up every time you and I talk. But he said, he was involved in, a lot of well-known businesses, right? So we don't have to give his bio, but he was in Facebook and a lot of others. He goes, all the CEOs that I worked with got really good at selling, right? And it's building the ask muscle and being really comfortable on ask and asking for business. And, I see that, I was lucky to grow up in sales, but then when I, kind of went into bigger businesses and the CEO, you could tell the CEO that just, maybe he wasn't trained in sales, but was good at it. Right. And those businesses were substantially more successful, right? Because of the fact that they just, they were good at the ask. But I think with getting at it and asking the questions and just being engaged allows you to really have an understanding of what's going on in the marketplace, right?
Mhm.
Because 5 salespeople could come back and said, nobody's buying at this price, right? And everybody in the corner office or the owner of just say, they're just not good at sales. But if they go out and have 5 conversations with clients, they're like, I love your products and services. It's just in this day and age with my receivables and my cash flow, a $20,000 investment, I can't do that. But if you price it at XYZ or 1, 2, 3, maybe I could do that. Right. And so now
Mhm.
that's a different conversation that an owner of a company could have, but they also are getting real time intelligence from the marketplace that will drive them to the next level.
Yeah, and to me that's so intuitive and something I've always done because I'm always like listening to prospects. Plus, I think you innovate so much better because you can really hear their problems, and if you're really listening to them, you can really hear their problems. But you made a good point, like where salespeople go, um, they're like, oh, the sales not working, or the marketing's not working, or this is the price is wrong. How can you tell if it's the marketing or the sales? How do you judge that? Because you were obviously in a direct response organization, so you knew both sides.
Yeah, I think it's both, right? And I'm not being flippant or giving a
No.
lazy answer, but I do think it's both, right? So I think marketing sets the table to make sales as easy as possible, right? And so if your marketing is spot on and you're attracting the right customer, ideal customer profile, right? Ideal avatar. If your messaging is spot on of who you help, right? And who you don't, right? Because it's important to that. We help people that want to pay premium services for premium products to get premium results. We aren't the lowest price provider. That now is detracting people that are looking for the lowest cost provider and attracting the people that want to pay and want to get exceptional results, right? And so if you think about it from a luxury brand standpoint, Ian, you are the best at what you do, right? Creating, YouTube execution for professional services and for entrepreneurs, you're bar none, right? And so therefore,
Thanks.
to give that level of service, what's sir? I'm sorry.
I hope so.
Yeah, you are. But to give that level in service, to provide the studio environment, to provide the IP that you've created so that they get the results that they want, you need to charge a certain price point. And that price point is probably a little bit of a premium. And that's okay because of the fact that really they're paying for results. And so the marketing sets the table so that they have a firm understanding when they get to the salesperson where the results and the pain and the discovery can happen. So that way, when we move to the enrollment phase or the conversion phase or the close phase, whatever phase you want to do it, is all set. But none of that will happen if they don't work together, right? And in
Yep.
our business, there's the marketing side, which is kind of the front end of the sale. But I also think it's the back end of the sale, right? Because then you don't get buyer's remorse. You don't get refunds if you're in a refundable business. You don't get people, you got to harvest the case studies like you teach people. You got to harvest the testimonials. You got to harvest everything. And that's your back end marketing side, right? So there's the front end marketing side. There's a conversion side that at some price points has to happen with a salesperson. There's a discovery component that has to happen with a salesperson, and then a conversion to sale, right? So it's a close. And then post, you need that marketing. So you're harvesting all those rich tools that you could use to go into your marketing machine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they have to work together. And I think
Yeah.
this is an important part too. Is it's interesting to me, like when I see marketing organizations that only sales tells what marketing tells sales what to do. They don't talk to each other
Right.
and go, hey, what's going on? What are the stories? What are you hearing? And especially early on, like it's super interesting to me that the sales, because the salespeople know before the market, they're indoctrinated what the people are saying. Because once they're inside the business, people are going to start speaking differently. It's funny you said, because I was thinking about this one real estate organization I taught, as a client, and their marketing did not use the word that was used by their clients. They didn't use these key words because once the clients are in, they're indoctrinated in. And I think it's such an important thing to go back and forth. But
so the interesting thing is, and I got to spend time with probably one of the best copywriters out there, right? One of the best direct response copywriters. But we had a lot of really good copywriters in our orbit or that were in our world when I was at GKIC. Dan is bar none the best. He will make a point whenever he takes on a new client or whenever he's doing a new product launch of listening to their top sales reps' sales calls. Because they say just what you said there. They say things, right? There's an intuition that they understand when they're on a call with somebody or when they're doing something with somebody that just happens, right? And so he will make a point, and if there is this thing where there's no recorded calls, maybe they're in the field, he will go out in the field or do driver alongs with clients, right? Back in the day, now he probably doesn't do that. But just the salesperson is using a language, and the language is either attracting or repelling the prospect, right? And so now marketing needs to capture that language and use that language as their bait because they know that is what converts. That's what attracts. It doesn't repel. And now goes back to how we started this conversation. You need to have a proven and repeatable sales process, proven and repeatable scripts. So that way, rep number 2, rep number 5, rep number 10, rep number 30, and so on are following the same language patterns, are using the same phraseologies, are using the same inclinations and tones and tonality and asking the right questions that are predetermined and not going off script. Now, you could, they're going to go off script and you got to coach them back, or sometimes you have to test the script, right? So you almost kind of create a playbook that becomes, in the direct response world, the control. And then you test against the control. Right now, you don't test all components, but you test different components, right? You might test a close at 20 minutes in versus a close at 40 minutes in, right? So the 20-minute in close is a trial close or a test close, and it can get you objections that you could start answering, right? So you're not doing a hustle at the end to get a person to convert. So, there's things you do, but none of it happens without having a proven and repeatable sales process. None of it happens without having it documented. None of it happens without testing to the mean.
And it's interesting because you're one of the first ones that talk about like it this way. And I mean, I know people talk through like the sales process and the sales script, but it's very generalized instead of going testing and like a marketer does, right? And it's so funny that all these marketers out there, the best ones, are out there testing, and then they just hope that they're going to get someone to come in and do sales that does a great job without a system, without any testing, without any scripts, without any they're just like, hey, go sell this thing. You're a good salesperson. And so coming back to, because this, for some people, they might have one salesperson, they might be about to hire their salesperson. When do you think, let's say, because you were in an agency and you're a great salesperson, when is the right time to start hiring a salesperson, and which salesperson do you hire?
Everybody's economics is different, right? And so in my agency, we paid all salespeople a base salary, right?
Yep.
And then they got a commission. And they have a bonus structure, right? And I'm all for the upside of the business being shared with everybody. So we were probably because I came from sales, we were probably very aggressive on that. So I think you should be hiring your salespeople once you could afford a base salary, right? That it doesn't stretch the cash flow of the business. And once you have lead flow coming in, right? I was just talking to a prospective client, and he's like, I'm my own worst thing because of the fact that I now am so booked up. I'm 2 weeks out before anybody could talk to me. People forget, they go on, they found different solutions, right? And so you have to look on that. And so then you say to yourself, okay, I'm investing X what is the return that I should expect on X, right? So everything in business is an investment. And so what am I willing to give up so I could get the upside of having a salesperson, right? So it should be at the very least 3 times their salary, or 4 times their salary. If you got good margins in your business and you have good price points, maybe it's as high as 10 times their salary. And so, would you make that trade all day long? If I was going to go to you and say, if you give me $1 for a stock, that stock will pay you back $4. Yes, I'd make that trade. And so you have to look at it from that perspective, but you have to have the system set up. And I think where you and I were talking about, and you kind of hit with your clients and people that you talk to, is they don't have the system in place. And so what they do then is hire a salesperson. There's no lead flow for the salesperson. Salesperson doesn't have any scripting. They're told to just, maybe listen to some calls that somebody did 10 years ago, right? Or 3 years ago, or a couple years ago, and now go at it. And so now you've set that salesperson up for failure. Right. I get these coaching all the time. I get these clients all the time. It's like, I tried a salesperson, paid him commission only. He only lasted a little bit. Then he took off. I'm like, yeah, of course. I can tell you why. 1 is you didn't have a lead flow. 2 is you didn't know who you should sell to. 3 is you didn't have any scripts for him. 4 is you didn't have a process for him. So you set him up or her up for failure at the beginning. It's not their fault. It's not your fault. We know that now. So let's fix it. Right. But that happens. It probably happened 16 times while you and I have been talking in businesses across the United States as we speak.
I agree with you. It's pretty crazy. So, you have enough money, and I guess people will go, have the system, have the salary. Now, do you hire I've hired people that are like like you said, a discovery answerer, a discovery person, someone who's like kind of a sales assistant first, and then moved into hiring a salesperson.
Yeah. So I didn't answer that part of the question. I think you're spot on. That's what I did. Right. So the first person that we hired, we were building our book of business up from scratch. Right. We had bought a couple little other agencies and a couple little things over time. So we had some clients, once we got cash flow coming in. But I hired what is now called the BDR, right? Business development rep. Back in the day, I called them an appointment setter, right? So I hired appointment setters first. Those appointment setters were then set up to feed the salespeople. I then hired the salesperson, right? Because what we were selling was a little transactional. If what I was selling was a little bit more bespoke, right? Or a little bit more complicated like you do, then I might do that, that middle salesperson that does all the discovery. Let's call it a sales assistant, for lack of a better phrase, or, a sales coordinator that's doing a lot of the predetermined conversations. So that way the owner could come in, and instead of spending an hour and 15 minutes, they're spending 15 minutes moving the person to close. And then if not, the coordinator becomes the chaser, right? Or the follow-up system and process. So you don't diminish the stature of the owner.
I love that. Yeah. And I agree with that completely, because I always said, it's like, you don't go walk straight into work with most doctors, right?
Right. Right. Oh yeah. I mean, you get 15 different questions. First off, they money qualified you before you went in the room, right? They're okay. What's your insurance? Let's take a picture of that. Now then, there's 1 or 2 techs that then do all of your predetermined things, and then there you come into the doctor, right? Yeah. And so why don't we set up our sales system similar to that? And I've seen really well established, usually it's on the professional service side of the firm, where he or she has a bunch of sales coordinators, right? That are kind of setting up, doing a discovery, setting him up or her up for just coming in and doing the close. And I think it's really invest in the system, create a process and create a system, right? And then from there, now you could take it to the next level. But until you do any of that, you're going to, now you're just being lazy, right? Because we've given you the clues, we've given you the text, we've given you the cheat code on this call. You just have to kind of implement it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it scares me so much when people are like, oh, I'm going to hire a salesperson. I'm like, do you have a system? Yeah, I do. Okay, it's written down. I can go read it. Well, I'm like, that's not a system. That's you winging it.
Yeah, and it's painful, right? And
Yeah.
it's I wonder how many good people did we run out of sales because of that, right?
Mm, yeah.
Uh, because they got into it. Maybe they were talked into a job by the business owner. And I think you and I agree, it doesn't have to be a traditional salesperson that you're hiring, right? It quite frankly could be a really good service provider, right? A really good bartender, I mean, we had a client and their number one setup and closer was an ex-bartender, right?
Yes.
And was phenomenal. And listen, I'd put her in any business I ever ran across. She was that good. And then, then we promoted her in as the sales manager so she could do the training that she did, could, train the other reps so that, and this was for a dental practice, so that the dentist was just focused on doing the work, right? And maybe coming in for the minor, you're 100% correct. This is what you do need, right? And it was cosmetic dentistry, right? So it wasn't inexpensive. But, a lot of times the professionals will mess up the sale. So you got to get them off of the sale and just have the coordinator do all the work and just have the professional come in, the service professional come in and give the blessing. And then the patient or the client or the prospect will say yes.
It's so true. And like, I think at that point, you don't have to have this super high powered salesperson. And I love the fact that you've went bartenders. I bartended and I've hired bartenders before because they know people.
Yeah.
I mean, they've dealt with the people at the worst situations and in volume, and they're not afraid to talk to people. And so, Nick, okay, so we create a sales system, hire like a sales assistant, hire a salesperson. At what point, should a owner become a sales manager? That to me seems like the worst job in the world.
It is the worst job. They should never be a sales manager, right? For many reasons. So, and I'm not biased because that's what we do, right? We're fractional sales leaders, fractional sales managers. But here's what's going to happen. One is that they won't have the patience to coach the salespeople, right? They'll rush right into trying to fix the salesperson versus coaching them. Second off is they won't ever get the real feedback from the salesperson because the salesperson will be worried that they're going to get fired, right? And I think the third is there's so much better use of their time than that, right? I mean, at that point, if they have multiple salespeople, they should be focused on the strategic direction of their organization. They should be focused on how do I build up the leaders of the organization so I'm making this a machine. If it's $1 million in sales, what do I need to do to get to 3 million, to get to 5 million, to get to 10 million? Those are the questions that they should be asking themselves.
Yes, it's so true. And so since we're on the subject, what's the process of working with you all, engaging you all? When should someone engage you all?
So I think, if they have a salesperson or two, they should have a conversation with us, right? And just talk to us a little bit about it. And the way that we start everything, quite frankly, is even if they don't have salespeople, but they're thinking about it, they should have a conversation with us because we sit down and do a diagnostic of what's going on. And actually, quite frankly, we look at the marketing, right? So what's going on with your marketing? What's your process? What's your systems? What does your people management look like? What does your tech stack look like? What does your sales management look like? All that stuff, right? So we go through a very diagnostic driven, much like how a doctor does stuff, and we look for where you at versus vis-a-vis best practices. From that, we could say, okay, here's your plan. Here's the top 10 things you need to work on. Here's the top 3 things you need to work on. Have at it, and we'll bless you. Or we could work with you and we could start creating the playbook, right? So now I need to sit down with the business owner and get into their head and figure out, how do we sell things in this place? And then I start creating the systemized process, right? And I create the lucid chart of how things process. And then I make it look pretty, right? But we got to test it against the mean and make sure that everything is going. And we test the scripting and make sure it's going. And then we put the meetings in place and we hire the salespeople. And so, we're all about, how do we add value? How do we increase the overall enterprise value of an organization and increase their sales? And that usually happens once they have at least one salespeople or two, or they know that they want to do it, so they need to create the foundation. And it goes back to what we talked about. They want to create the foundation, so when they hire the people, they set the people up for success versus having them flop on their face and fail.
Love it. Love it. And so we'll put a link to all that in the show notes, put a link to your LinkedIn in there. And one of these days we'll get your YouTube in there as well.
I know. How sad am I?
No, that's all right. We'll be putting this on YouTube. Some of you will be watching this on YouTube. But Nick, thank you so much for being on the Garlic Marketing Show. I really appreciate it.
First off, I usually start by this, but we kind of just jumped into the deep end of the pool. So I'm gonna pull myself out of the pool and tell you something that I really meant to say at the beginning. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for how focused you are on helping small to mid-sized business owners. Your focus on really bringing good guests, good marketing advice, good systems and processes in place so that they don't waste any of their hard-earned money. And you really are passionate about this. You almost bleed it, right? And there's a lot of people out there in their various spaces who names we know, but we won't mention, that don't have that passion and we were talking about some people and you're like, oh man, if they would just listen to this, blah, 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 I get them a 10x return on their marketing investment. You bleed this. You care about small business owners and professional service owners. And I really want to thank you for that, right? It's the pool I'm in every day. It's who I talk to. And there's a lot of hurt out there. There's a lot of people that are struggling, and it pains me that I can't help them or they won't listen to our advice. But I know there's good guys like you and your team and the wonderful stuff that you do. Listen, small business owners are the backbone of every community.
Yep.
Go up and down. I'm in Park Ridge, Illinois. You spent time in Chicago. You know where I'm at. Up and down the streets. There's two Starbucks because we're really preppy. But other than that, there's not a lot of chains, right? But there's small businesses. There are, the plumbing, the distributors, the small businesses, the manufacturing companies. They're all around us. And that's what drives everybody's economy. And you have such a passion to help them that I really, really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. It's awesome when you can work with someone and transform their lives and transform their family. And it's hard to do that with the big business, but I appreciate
it's not as rewarding, right? I mean, here you got a guy or a gal that listens to you and gets their business and transforms it. And now they're putting their kids through college, right? Now they're funding their retirement. Now they have an asset that when they go to sale, they have just a different enterprise value that they sell it at more than they ever thought, right? And they took on 20 years of blood, sweat, and tears, right? They sweated out payroll. They were the last ones to take a check out of the business. And you get them to such a level that it's just phenomenal. So keep doing what you're doing, please.
Oh, yeah, I will. I appreciate that. And thank you all for taking Nick and I on your journey. Make sure to contact him. About sales. Folks, you got to do it. This has been Iron Garlic and the Garlic Marketing Show.